Hey, Laura J here with a significant message today. It was 3 years from the day when I got locked up under the Mental Health Act because I didn't know that I was not my person. That I have one, I am not it, though I will be implied to be it, until I clarify that I do not consent becoming a surety for it, which means being responsible for actually getting it to court and letting it be subjected to the rule of others who would wear a suit to diagnose me. She was the one that received three diagnoses from doctors in the years to come that said I am bipolar, which I do not consent to nor agree with, though I do accept that I am extreme in my emotionality because I move energies in motion freely. I move it quickly as well because I feel it and then I work through it and I verbalize what's going on. So I have eyes to see the verbal lies or truths that I am working through in the moment that the energies in motion show up to be resolved. I remember one of the psychiatrists after that experience, September 27th, 2019, when I got locked up and then lost my freedom for 2.5 weeks and got myself out because the doctors convinced those who could have helped that I needed to actually be in there. So they were not recommended to help me get out, and they didn't. And then when I found out that I could leave, I called a friend who was ironically coming to the same institution for a procedure that her brother was getting done. And so they were already literally going to be there the day that I needed a ride home in a chariot that kept me safe. And we did do a video, it never got shared, I never received it, but I remember being so just quiet, shamed. It was so difficult coming home from that institutionalization experience that 2 weeks later, I was going through a suicidal ideations experience where I didn't want to have to rebuild. I didn't want to have to rebuild everything that I had destroyed in the tarot moment of the tower or the equivalent of it, when life as I knew it was destroyed, and the life that I have now created was not yet deployed in my awareness as to how I was going to do it, for that is the mental trap that we get stuck in, when it is actually the heart that has to magnetize the cooperative parts to us in order for us to then be able to receive that which we desire, which is to give birth to. So I was sitting in the back seat of this vehicle, feeling quite surreal and quiet and wishing for it to be documented because I knew it was part of a documentary essentially of my life and the defining moment within it. That then 2 weeks later, I just didn't know how I was going to rebuild my life. And it was just so hard to be climbing up from the bottom of the cave of my own soul. Don't even know that I made it all the way down the hole to the heart center of it all. Because in November 2019, when my mom took me to the hospital, this time in a depressive state, because I was so depressed underneath the heaviness and weight of all that had happened and the emotions on top of it from that experience, I really did feel the victim, which needs a rescuer to save us from the persecutor, which is why the mental health system befits. Because then we become diagnosed by a doctor who's rescuing us and helping us know ourselves better, right? And then the system itself is the punisher and the one that comes after the victim and says, you did not do what you were supposed to, and so you will be punished and diagnosed and made to change your identity to conform to that which we deem you to be. And I say, no, I'm not accepting that, thanks. And I remember in that process because I'd had an experience with mental health issues, which I quote because I don't buy the BS. And we'll get into that in a bit. But in April 2019, when I'd come back from a 3-week sojourn, where a woman claiming to be a soul doula who could help me rebirth myself naturally, since I'd done that in a DMT ceremony, which is dimethyltryptamine, which our brains produce at birth, death, and in dream state, which help you essentially pierce through the veils of this reality in order to see what is beyond. So you go beyond the beyond, and then you are in the all, and you say, oh, wow, I am so fantastic. And so are you, because we are all in this together, because that is where the power lies. So in April 2019, when I went through a super low getting back from an experience where I was manipulated and used, I never got paid for that trip. And the one who claimed to be a soul doula, who may be a great woman, but I didn't get to actually receive friendship out of an opportunity that I thought was what I was betting on as to why we shared it. And so it's all relative, because in the scheme of things, by betraying me, she did help me rebirth myself, because I learned how I was giving my power away. It was a pattern I had. And I say that in Fully Committed, the sacred sojourn of now, which I had went out with her to Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and California for those 3 weeks in order to finish and complete, but I couldn't because I hadn't been through the ringer and back. So I was trying to share theories that didn't feel grounded. And so then fast forward to September, when I got locked up in the institution and found my theories weren't helping me because they were in the head and not the heart. That was where I started to actually walk my talk and use those theories, which is what I now share in Fully Committed. When I got committed, in order to go to the depths of my soul to know the truth, so far as I see it and believe it to be, and am willing to stand on with conviction, which is a calling. Conviction is a calling. It's one of the definitions that I talk about in the book. And I also went into deeper in the special practice pilot program that I am running for a small group of beautiful souls who are piloting this experience, where I'm breaking through some of the emotional scar tissue from having tried to release that program, launch it for several years. And then, with all that unfolded 3 years ago this day, all of that changed in a way that I couldn't have possibly comprehended. But I say this because in April 2019, when I went to my first low point and didn't want to live because I felt so ashamed, because I had been shamed by the one who claimed to be my friend and wasn't. And then fast forward, I rebuilt myself because opportunities presented themselves and I didn't pull the trigger and didn't have any intention to. I just didn't know what to do in order to rebuild my life. And I pushed through it anyway. And I sat in some really dark holes, which are called the dark night of the soul. We've heard about it for years, but I actually turned that in the book under the sacred sojourn of the soul, which I is how I refer to the hero's journey from a soulful perspective, to be the dark light of the soul. And before that, the dark night with a K of the ego, for it is the statuses, titles, and personages we take on in the name of the ego's benefit, that we actually must be stripped of all that in order to step into the dark light of the soul, where we see that the higher we climb, the longer our shadow becomes. After I went through those two episodes, April 2019, September 2019, and then November 2019, when I finally surrendered and just didn't want to live, didn't know how to do it, kind of gave up on myself because I had just destroyed my reputation very publicly. I did live videos I would share today that were very heightened emotionally, and I won't, because I don't have them anymore, because I followed poor advice advice that was added to me by someone who was trying to be nice and say, Laura, you need to get those videos down because you are not going to be hireable by anyone that wants you without the craziness that comes with it. So get rid of it. And I said, okay, even though I knew I should have just taken them off of my page at that time, I deleted them and I no longer have access to them. Facebook does because it stores everything in the ethernet of the internet, forgetting that we have an internet. November 2019, I remember this man acting as psychiatrist that I had seen back in April 2019. And then he was aware of what I'd been through September because the system is connected and it's in my notes within the card that I no longer have renewed. But the point is, when we met, he said, what are the chances that three of us were wrong about your diagnosis? And I kind of thought to myself, pretty high, because you've never actually been inside to find out why all of this is happening. There were emotions that needed to move that could only prove what I knew then and ultimately had the ability to relate to it. And it was in a dysfunctional way. Own it. Totally own it. Wouldn't do it that way ever again. But I'm grateful that that version of me did because of all we went through and survived because I didn't pull the trigger. And that is what we must remember. We must remember not to pull the trigger in those moments where we feel like it's never going to end because it does. The new day always comes if we allow ourselves to survive to see it. If we actually become responsible enough in our own lives to say that better days are coming, better days are ahead. Ahead, this is ahead. And then we apply that instead to ahead of us. Forge forward. Anyway, I'm just being dramatic. But I say all of this because that man's diagnosis was significant to me because he tried to take my power and I was at a super low state. And it was like, this institution didn't help me any of those three times when I tried to get help. Though the second time I wasn't trying, I just was deemed to need it. And because I didn't know how to plead, not guilty, because the universe doesn't differentiate negatives. It only gives us more of what we're focused on. So if not guilty is the focus, guilt is actually the focus of that. So not guilty and innocent are not the same thing. And furthermore, it's not even guilt and innocence. It is, I do not believe I did anything wrong. And any man or woman that wants to take the stand under oath to claim that I did, to make a superior claim to mine that I did nothing wrong, well, so be it. Then that will be the man I see that I will put on the notice and the claim I make against the man or woman that is causing me harm, loss, and perpetuating fraud, such as what the system requires the men and women acting on behalf of it to do. And what's funny is I have the papers from that whole second experience that traumatized me and started 3 years ago today. And it was Dr. S.O. Sullivan that diagnosed me, which is Dr. SOS diagnosed me, though there was no diagnoses other than to say that I was incapable of caring for myself and might cause harm to myself or someone else. And that was why I needed to be locked up, which I was outing patterns which were not safe to do because omerta is a from Italian mafia culture where basically if you've got beef with someone, you need to solve it yourself. You do not get the authorities involved. And that was literally the pattern that I had tuned into, which now we're seeing en masse. It's called omerta. It's called omerta. And it was significant and profound and just wow on so many levels. I can't even describe it fully. But I'm trying because what I want to say is that after a crazy experience, January 2020, after everything else that I had been through in 2019, I had a breakdown in February 2020 that led me into a crisis stabilization bed program for 5 days in Simcoe. And I'm grateful that it was available. And It did nothing to help me other than give me reprieve from my own life, which to go, I lost 2 contracts, which was not nice, but ultimately forced me to have to restart when I got out of there. And by having to do so and having lost so much confidence in the process, I basically didn't see myself worthy of any position of authority or power. So I applied to a minimum wage position as a cashier, which then became on the front lines days or weeks after. We hadn't even gotten through our training when it was announced that someone in the store had had COVID and there was a shutdown, which I believe to be connected to the 5G technologies that were installed quietly when others weren't able to be around in order to know what was going on. For if a tree falls in a forest and there is no sound, did it make one? My hypothesis. And ultimately, what is science but the best hypothesis proven until a better one comes to replace it? And then how can we see how the conscience, the con science, is the science of consciousness that we are all being ployed for, trolled for? Our attention is one of the most valuable assets that we have. And in 2020, February 2020, when I gave up on myself and I just said, okay, well, maybe the doctors are right. And, when I got out of my second experience 2.5 weeks from now, 3 years ago, the doctor didn't want me to leave, Dr. Bieber. Yeah. So, Justin, JB, hey, hey, my friend. I don't know whether there's a direct connection, but I liked that energy connection came into my experience. And I haven't shared names publicly because there's the part of me that's like, are there implications for doing so? Yet I don't know the first name of the man that ultimately told me, he personally guaranteed me that I would fail to self regulate. And when I did, to go to the hospital, to the emergency room, too much sleep would make me manic, and too little sleep would make me depressed. Too much sleep would make me depressed, too little sleep would make me manic. That was his advice, adding vice to my life after I had been through so much that was not nice. I say asshole because that was just so wrong. And yet also makes complete sense because if you can break someone when they're at their lowest point, most vulnerable, and you can tell them what you believe as the authority they tie their identity to in that moment, then you've got power and they lose it. And that didn't happen to me because I was so pissed off that a man would make that claim, not just to me, but I knew that if he'd do it to me, he'd do it to others too. And that was just wrong. And I do believe there should be liability, not just the ability to lie, but responsibility and accountability attached to that position and that claim because it was a man making it. A personal guarantee? Well, fuck ye. Sorry, a little bit passionate because I just feel like it was so wrong. Because do you know how many men and women actually die within days or on the day when the doctor diagnosed they would because they put so much of their energy into what they said that they lost their power and then followed that instead of what they could do if they actually became the author they tied their own identity to? Author, I tie authority, my identity to. I break words down in an interesting way because my brain works in a different way. And when I got locked up, I was making claims that I still say. I just don't necessarily do them so publicly. And I am more careful, full of care about what I share and who I share it with. And that is what we must all dare to do because not all are safe, especially those who are dialed into a literal reality that cannot accept or acknowledge or validate the mythic, symbolic, or energetic patterns and energies that are at play simultaneously to the literal one that we live in, that we call reality, as the realistic evidence appearing legit in tomorrow's yesterday that we live in. clearing my throat to clear the air. And I would share that I am going to burn some Palo Santo there. Palo Santo being a fantastic tool to be able to clear the air, but also to replace it with intention. For we live in a universe that operates by the law of the vacuum, which is not a real law, but you can call anything a law if you claim to be the authority of the words that you speak and the spells that you cast. So Palo Santo is fantastic that way. And I clear my own throat chakra and wish for you to receive the clearing too. It's 10:55 on September 22nd, 2022. And I am grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to share my tale, my story from 3 years ago when life as I knew it changed forever. And then why I wanted to make this video, my friend, is because I received an email this morning. It was based off of a decision made last week. And the beautiful thing about that is that it is so connected in ways that we couldn't imagine if it wasn't actually happening. And I'll not show it to you because there is the name of a man that I am going to make a formal claim against for causing me harm, loss, and fraud over the last year and a half while I have been working to clear my name of a charge for an implied offense where I said, who did I offend? And if they'll not be present, which is said to have been Her Majesty, well, she is a woman, and who is she? Because there was a woman making a counterclaim named Ramona Del Dulo. So I didn't say her name correctly. However, it's just to say there were two women vying for the title. And if neither of them were going to be present, then who did I offend? And if they're not willing to take the stand under oath and make the claim that I did something wrong, then I didn't do anything wrong. So, good morning, Miss Hamilton. This email is to advise that the Crown on September 21st, 2022 asked for your matter to be brought forward from this October 31st, 2022 trial date. Pursuant to Section 32(1) of the Provincial Offences Act, the charge before the court was stayed. You are not required to attend court on October 31st as the matter is now completed. I have copied the man acting as prosecutor persecuting this matter on this email. If you have any questions, thank you. Court Operations and Trial Coordinator. No name, because that would have actually given me the ability to make a claim against the one that is moving things, though they've stopped moving things. So technically, the one acting as court operations and trial coordinator has not done anything wrong unless they were involved previously all along, in which case they absolutely did do something wrong because there was no jurisdiction over me in this matter, which means they had no ability to apply their rights when I stepped forward and claimed via lawful notice that I am a woman in my private capacity with all common law rights reserved at all times, which means that they have no jurisdiction, especially because I also claimed to be a woman self-governing. If I'm self-governing, I need no external jurisdiction or rules applied to me because I know to not cause harm, loss, fraud, or to keep the peace in my life. That's the common law tenets that I follow to live well. And my experience 3 years ago taught me a lot still. So I wanted to share that because it was this day that I received that message, even though it was 6 days ago. Of course it was, 6 being a number of change and resolution. So beautiful, so profoundly significant too. So all of this I say to you after more than 20 minutes in the view that we might not understand the darkness we're walking through as we do, but if we keep walking, we'll be able to get to the other side eventually. And when we do, then we can look back at all we've been through to see how it shaped you into who you need to be in this world. For there is only one you, there is only one me. And if we do not be authentic and do what is required to be vulnerable and transparent and actually be a responsible parent to ourselves, well, then we risk falling in a way we cannot afford collectively. So, I also wanted to share a message that I saw on Facebook that I do believe ties in because it's the hologram of deception, your armor. So I'm going to read this, and it is said to be by angelic.humanity on a platform, I'm not sure which, but there is a picture of it shared to Peaceful Inner Warriors United Assembly on Telegram, which is a group that I do my best to share information on that can just empower and uplift and inspire. And it's beautiful because in the assembly group, which is different from Peaceful Inner Warriors United, which is a broadcast, so you can't actually contribute back because it's limited to only what I share, because I didn't know the difference when I created it and then had to create the group, which I called an assembly because we have every right to lawfully assemble in the name of peace and honor and connecting, because that is what we're meant to do. So here we go. This is hologram of deception, or purity of heart. Let your heart be your guide, your armor. Your only armor is purity of heart, which externalizes itself as gentleness of care expressed toward your fellow humans, expressed toward your fellow beings. In the hologram of deception, there is no ascension or a means of escape. There is only transcendence, and transcendence is the true achievement your soul craves. You, as the ego personality, mistook your soul's craving for transcendence for some purpose you had to fulfill in your current lifetime to better serve the inmates who you've been bonded with, who you've bonded with and grown to love during your unrecognized imprisonment inside the mind control prison. So you go about drifting, wholly unaware that there is no purpose for being in prison, at least not for the prisoner. The mind control programs you've run since your youth keeps you from seeing the obvious truth that purpose is a program and that in every moment you were meant to just be. Because it is in the being that the grand portal of transcendence, through which the love of your soul eternally calls for you, is developed. It is this call that draws you near to the enigmatic porch lights emanating from the front steps of the home of transcendence. Transcendence is the only one inside the simulation who knows the path to the house of oneness. And if you cannot charm him with the purity of your intentions, his heart will remain uninspired and being unmoved. He will not show you the path back home to oneness. Beyond simulated time, where the individuated and imprisoned consciousness that inhabit Earth, human, animal, and plant life alike, exist as one being. I loved that. And I hope that it inspires you to see through the deception of the ego's need to have a purpose, a calling, a mission, and to realize that it is placed in the heart, and then we just must be that which sees without necessarily needing to orate it. Because corporations are the corpses that orate their rules and apply them to men and women who got confused and thought that we were bound to those. But mandates and the man I date are not the same nor equal. And any man or woman that tells me what man I can date is ultimately causing me harm, loss, or fraud, because if I wait for someone else to determine my fate and get to choose on my behalf, they're going to choose wrong, because what if I already chose? And I chose well because of resonance and what I felt. And so, because of that, when someone else told me what man I could date, they're then causing me harm because it's different from what in my heart I know to be true. That is what I say to you as a final message in this message, because mandates are the equivalent to that. Don't wait for someone to decide what you can do. Make a claim against any man or woman who tries to uphold a mandate against you that causes you harm, loss, and fraud, and make your claims. You take names. And then you move forward and you actually take it to the Supreme Court of Canada, if necessary, where you stand as a man or a woman on your claims you have made via lawful notice that you wrote yourself because you know how to right wrongs. You write the wrongs that are happening, you make your claims in the lawful notices, and then you give them an honorable period of time to respond. And if they don't, then they are causing you harm, loss, and fraud personally. Just like the man that personally guaranteed me I would fail to self regulate. And when I did, to go to the ER because too much sleep would make me depressed and too little sleep would make me manic. That's actually good advice, adding vice, but the insight that depression is connected to too much sleep because you lose momentum compared to too little sleep makes you manic and you're so high because your vibes are not able to actually be cleared, which is what we do when we sleep. The REM cycle, we need to go to a deeper level so that we can let go of that energy in motion that moved during the day. It needs to leave in the night or whenever it is that we actually dream. We're dreaming all the time. This is a reality. Don Miguel Ruiz calls it a mitote, which is said to be the reality that we live in. But all of this is to say sleep is very important. Too much, though, is not good, and too little is also not good. So if we could just meet somewhere in the middle on common ground, which is common law, in a different context, because now it's not in the nodding off time frame where our eyes are closed and we are recharging ourselves, but in the public sphere we can maintain our ability to stand in our private capacity with all rights reserved at all times. And that means that even when we traipse into the public for a position, for an event, for something, for some reason, when we traipse into the public, we don't lose our right to remain in our private capacity if we've claimed the right to do so. You see? Oh, me. Oh, my. What do you say? No lies. Leave a comment down below to let me know. And I look forward to continuing on with the show of my own life. So, you know, and may you do the same and be the star, for you are the only you there will ever be. I hope this resonates with ye and will look forward to your comments down below. And please do also share this with someone who may have let a past event experience define them. Because ultimately, we've all been through a lot. And we've all survived 100% of our darkest days up to this point. So may we continue with that and to know the maid service being offered now that's taking souls that are in pain or fear out of the game. We're here to make sure that maid service is not required because we need to be there for one another so that souls are not stolen in the night. This is a fight for souls. You matter. And whoever you believe also matters, please make sure they get this message. If they're considering a maid service, recognize that if you do, and you exit this matrix because it's hard now, imagine coming back into a reality where you didn't do what you came here to do now, so it's not done, and now you're living in a reality that isn't fun because there are gaps that you fall into because you were meant to fill those cracks in this life. I'm not trying to be harsh. I just say it with a level of sternness because I don't wish that for you. And I know that it is not common knowledge that is openly discussed because it sounds a little woo woo. And we've been told that reincarnation is a faith foundation or tradition. BS, belief systems that make us say, oh, reincarnation isn't real. We just die and become like a groundhog on the side of the road, belly up. That's it. Well, I beg to differ. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only displaced, transmuted, transcended. It just changes form. Like water put into a kettle, when the steam rises out of that kettle, that was water. Now it's steam, and now we cannot see it because it has evaporated. But it was still the original form, just transmuted, transformed, transcended. Our soul is the same. It might not be in this vessel, but it will come back into a different one, because when that vapor rises, it collects in a cloud and then rains down and becomes water again. So please know that the maid service is not in your best interest. Moving emotions is. And when we do, we trigger others and activate others, and we don't often do it functionally, because if we've never faced those emotions, those energies in motion, we start riding real fast. I called it riding the magic of the moment because the moment is very magical. But it just sounded really cray-cray to a lot of people that didn't understand what I was trying to say. And I was moving way too fast for them to be able to settle their own nervous systems to receive the information I was trying to share, thinking information were the dots we need to connect, when the truth is, information is light. We are the God sparks incarnate. The light within me honors and recognizes the light in you, which is the saying behind Namaste. So the dots that need to be connected are not information in the head, which keeps us in a trap, instead of in the heart, where we can start to actually feel the resonance of connection as the dots that need to come into connection again. Connect the dots, mean connect us. I'm grateful that you gave me this opportunity to share my BS, my belief systems. You can take them, you can leave them, you can work with them to make them your own in a way that resonates for you and feel safe, so that you can move through this life that you have as the one and only you there ever has or will be. Just do it from here and not from here, because this is a trap, which is why it's so popular now. Blessings. Wished your way. Laura J. Namaste. Namago for today. Thank you.